Thanks for tuning in to another segment of the Urban Scope podcast. A topic I've been thinking about probably over the last year or so, just being a sports fan and especially a fan of sports debate. So right now, you have Gil's Arena, you have a lot of other smaller podcasts going on. Well, not podcasts, but sports debate shows. You have ESPN First Take still that's around. FS1 has a slew of different shows, combinations they're trying to work around, but none of these combinations worked well as FS1's Undisputed with Skip and Shannon. Now, ESPN First Take with Skip and Stephen A. Smith was probably up there in that same realm, but I'm going to talk about why Skip and Shannon's Undisputed was the creme de la creme, the top. It'll never be matched again because the dynamic was very unique. They had the opposing viewpoints as well, like most shows have now. One person's going to argue one side, the other person's going to argue another side, but that's not what separates them from other shows. What separates them from other shows is just the sheer bravery that they had on topics, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But after Skip left ESPN back in 2016, I continued to watch ESPN First Take because like I said, I'm pretty routine. I don't go away from routine. I order the same things, look at the same things. I pretty much don't veer off too much without a heavy cosign or some kind of persuasion to do something different. So, like I said, I was watching ESPN all this time and never paid much attention to FS1 because they really didn't have the sports debate shows. They had a lot of live sports and things like that. But Skip kind of opened the road for them to do sports debate and to veer off into another segment that they usually didn't go into. But nevertheless, I remember seeing a clip on YouTube, or maybe it might have been social media somewhere, where Skip and Shannon were talking about the incident in Tulsa regarding the police brutality. And I remember watching that. I was like, wow, I didn't even realize sports shows could broach those topics or even discuss those topics with the politics of the atmosphere of what sports is centered around. When you think about ESPN, they're tied to Disney. So you don't think that they can veer off into topics like that. But being on FS1, a Fox Sports network, they were able to talk about these topics, and they began to talk about these topics more, whether it be the racism in baseball, the racism of the owners, the slave mentality that the owners had, and things like that. And if you get a chance, definitely read the book, $40 Million Slaves. Very good read, talking about the racial dynamics and politics inside of sports when it comes to minorities and things like that. But Skip and Shannon talking about these topics took it to the next level, especially with Skip's stubbornness and Shannon's ability to make things comical and make things relatable to urban culture. And that's what I think, a reason why I think that Skip picked Shannon for that show, to bring that different perspective, to bring that over urban culture audience, and to bring a more lightness to the show, because Skip is more serious and he does joke around sometimes and he can be comical at times, but that's not really his lane. That lane, it was set for Shannon Sharpe, who was able to take that to Club Shay Shay and take it to ESPN and, just become a more popular figure that he has become over this last couple of years. But just that, what did it for me, them talking about those social issues and being able to push the envelope forward and actually bring thought-provoking topics and a different perspective on things, whether they talked about the CTE and the experience and the pros and cons of the game, and just talking about the ins and outs, not just reporting on things, but actually it felt like a podcast more than a sports show. And that was very unique for their show, because it felt like they were being themselves and they wasn't controlled from a script or from a narrative or agenda that the network was trying to push. It was very laid back, but they didn't have that Disney behind them to kind of box them in like that. And that's why I think their show was more successful, or more relatable, I should say. Similar to what Cam and Mace does, but It Is What It Is. They're self-owned and they can pretty much do the language they want, use the language they want, push the topics they want. And, they're not stuck talking about the Lakers, the Cowboys. They're not stuck talking about just the generic four topics that we're used to in so much in these, especially in the three major sports that everyone talks about so well, every day. But they do, Undisputed had that relatability, and I think that was very good for them to have that because it showed aspiring broadcasters that there's another way, and you just don't have to be held down or be controlled by agenda. They created their own narratives for the most part, but unfortunately, they didn't. Um, they spent like 6 years together, but unfortunately, everything went sour in the end. And I think that was mostly just due to the outside noises. And I think if they had talked, they would have been able to work it out. But it's still one of my favorite shows to watch. I don't compare any other show to it. I still go back sometimes and watch some of the old shows, even though we know how the ending turned it out or we know how the situation ended. But it's still great TV. It's great sports commentary. It's great narratives. It's great agendas. Uh, it was very, uh, it was very different and relatable. But they had that opposing viewpoints for Skip being a LeBron lover. I mean, LeBron hater. Shannon being a LeBron lover. Uh, you know, Skip liking the Cowboys and Shannon always mocking the Cowboys, similar to what he had with Stephen A. Smith. But the demise of the show, it will always go down as the top sports debate show for me. It's similar to how I still watch The Wire. A decade later after it's not on anymore, I still watch ESPN first. I mean, FS1's Undisputed. So, but as always, until next time, I'll see you next time.